Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham, and joining me today on the line, we have a special guest. He will be fighting Friday night at UFC Albany. He is Gian Villante. And Gian, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Now, of course, your original opponent was supposed to be Patrick Cummings. He got hurt. You are now taking on Safarov, if I said that name correctly. Not a lot of information on him on the UFC website or on Sheerdog. So, how much time have you actually had to sit and kind of analyze his game here?
Not a lot. I'm not, I can't really be worried about his game. I'm just got to go in there and fight my game. So, no matter who it was, him, Patrick Cummins, whoever I'm going to fight, I'm going there and fight the same way. Go for the knockout, put on an exciting show for the fans, and that's it. That's what I try to do every fight, no matter who it is. I don't know much about this guy's name. Can't say his name. I can't do much about it, but I'm just gonna go in there and try to get a win and put on a good show.
Now, of course, with this fight being in Albany, this will be the first time you will be able to fight in your home state of New York. So that's got to be pretty awesome for you, right?
Yeah, I've been doing the sport a long time, since 2009, so 7 years now. Long time. So fought all over the world, brought me all over the country, all over the world. Been enjoying that, but to be able to fight in my home state, the one place I haven't been able to yet, is something that I'm very excited for, and I just think it's something that's awesome. It kind of shows that this is a legit professional sport. This isn't just a bunch of guys going out there and beating each other up. This is a professional sport. When you come to a place like New York, I think it just legitimizes it that much more.
Now, of course, one of your teammates, Chris Weidman, was able to fight on the, technically the second New York card, but the first ever in obviously a very long time at UFC 205 at Madison Square Garden. What were your thoughts on the event as a whole there at MSG?
Yeah, it was a little bittersweet for me because I was supposed to be on that card and I got pushed back because of a knee injury. But between that and then, my friend, my best friend, winning and just getting caught with a knee and just pretty crazy fight that he was in. It was tough to watch, but the event was awesome. I enjoyed it very much. Thought it was cool. It just showed you how far our sport has come. To me, I watched that movie American Gangster, and they were talking about the Ali Frazier fight at MSG, all the way back then, how every celebrity showed up, and it was just it was like an event to be at. It wasn't just a fight. And that's what it felt like to me. It just felt like an event that everyone wanted to be at, and there was all sorts of celebrities and athletes there and stuff like that. So it was cool to see other people appreciating our sport as much as I appreciate it.
Now, another one of your teammates, Aljamain Sterling, he was also supposed to fight this night in Albany. He got a little bit of injury, had to not compete on this event. I didn't know if you had any updates on Aljamain.
Yeah, I think a lot of his thing was just something to do with the medicals getting cleared in New York. I know there's a couple more obstacles that you have to go through. And for whatever reason, I don't know much about it. I didn't ask him. I felt an awkward situation to ask him about it, but I just know that something was going on with that, and he should be fine in no time. And whatever he needed to get checked out, he got checked out, and he's good. But it's an unfortunate thing. This happens to us sometimes, and I appreciate the New York Athletic Commission looking out for Aljamain and stuff like that to make sure that he was okay and they didn't want anything bad happening. So, it's unfortunate he couldn't fight with me. It would have been fun, but it'll happen when it's supposed to.
Now, of course, getting back to your fight here in Albany, at least according to the stats I was able to pull up on your new opponent, 8-0, 6 wins by knockout. He also has finished all his fights. He has 2 submissions to his credit. Looks to be more of a striking background. Do you think that change, as opposed to Patrick Cummings, who was a collegiate wrestler, do you think for you that plays more into your hand as more of a striking-based fighter?
I don't know. I mean, I like facing the grapplers because to me they're the grapplers are the guys that they try to take me down. I have good wrestling defense. I wrestled, so it's not that big of a deal for me. So either way, I really don't care who the hell it is. Gonna beat the guy up. So that's the end. That's the end case scenario. I don't know. I mean, how do I feel about this fight? The only thing I was upset about was it wasn't a guy that was going to move me further up the rankings. But just right now, it's just go get a win and beat this guy, and that's that. Just really focus on this next fight, get the win, and then figure out what goes on from there.
Now, according to the UFC website, they haven't put a finalized version of what's the main card and what's the undercard and all that. But considering how long you've been in the UFC and you are currently ranked the number 15 light heavyweight in division, it's a pretty safe bet your fight will be on the main card for Fox Sports 1.
I believe so. That's what I was told. I mean, that's the original case was it was supposed to be that, but with the new opponent, I'm not sure. But I think I'm a New York guy. I think they probably want to keep me up there pretty good, and I have a lot of friends and fans and family coming. So I mean, to me, it doesn't matter where I'll be, but I'm sure I will be. I always put on exciting fights, so they like to make sure they put me in a good spot, so the fans can appreciate it.
Now, I think probably besides fighting over in New Jersey, this is probably one of the few fights you would actually be able to just drive to, right? You didn't have to worry about, getting on a flight and worry about, getting a passport or anything, right?
No, none of that. I'm actually taking a train, which was a little easier for me. I hate driving, so I put my feet up, chill on the train, and relax. Maybe go to sleep a little bit. So should be easy. It's only a 2.5-hour train, so not that long of a day, and chill out. Yeah, I'm actually traveling today, so it shouldn't be that bad.
Well, real quick, I'll get you out of here with this, Gian. Of course, the main event of the evening, another guy with a very hard-to-pronounce name from Russia, Shamil Abdurakhimov. If I said that correctly, he's taking on the Black Beast, Derek Lewis. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that main event because that should be a pretty exciting one in the heavyweight division. Yeah,
definitely excited, man. Those guys, Derek is, I got to hang out with him a little bit, doing some media stuff for this fight, and he's an awesome guy, funny guy. So I'd love to see him win and get in there and get a win. He's a fun guy to watch fight, and I'm pulling for him.
He is Gian Villante. You can watch his fight on Fox Sports 1 Friday, December 9th at UFC Albany against Safarov. You can also follow him on Twitter and Instagram at GP Villante. And Gian, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I look forward to your fight on Friday night.
Thanks, homie. Appreciate it.
Once again, that was Gian Villante right here on Beyond the Cage. Once again, thanks to Gian Villante for coming on the show this afternoon. We'll get to his fight and the other 3 fights featured on the main card there for UFC Albany. Small correction, I said FS1 during the interview is actually going to be on the UFC Fight Pass this Friday night. So go to UFC.tv to sign up for your free trial, or, of course, if you already have it. So that is not a paid ad, just letting you know how to watch the event on Friday. Before we get to those picks, as I mentioned, a couple of things I want to take care of. I want to start first with the Ultimate Fighter 24 finale. That took place last Saturday in Las Vegas at the Pearl at the Palms Casino and Resort. It started first with the main card in the flyweight division, as a lot of these fights were in the flyweight division. And if you notice, they used the smaller cage for one of those reasons, the 25-foot cage, which I'm a fan of, and there's really no debating that the fights were really exciting.
come fight night there in Las Vegas. But anyways, first fight of the evening, flyweight division, Brandon Moreno against Ryan Benoit. Moreno was rated the 16th fighter coming into this season of the Ultimate Fighter. Took on number one fighter Alexander Pantoja, who was the reigning RFA flyweight champion. Went toe-to-toe with him for 10 minutes. Did get, or nearly 10 minutes, did get finished there towards the end, but had a great fight in the process. While the show was still going on, he took a short notice fight against one of our friends of the show, and Louis Smolka was able to submit Smolka in the first round. That was back at UFC Fight Night Portland. That was in October. With the victory over Smolka, ends up earning a spot in the top 15 of the UFC. Ends up getting this matchup here on the finale against Ryan Benoit, who has had some ups and downs in the UFC. He came out and lost against Josh Sampo, who was a really highly rated fighter at the time. That was back at the Ultimate Fighter 18 finale back in 2013. Had some setbacks, did not return to the octagon until March of 2015, where he had a huge upset victory knocking out Sergio Pettis. Since then has kind of traded wins and losses, as he lost to Ben Nguyen, getting submitted by him. No shame there, Ben Nguyen's really good. But then defeated Freddie Serrano in kind of a weird, bizarre fight there at UFC 201. So had won 2 out of his last 3 coming into this fight here against Brandon Moreno. You would think that Benoit maybe have a little bit of the striking advantage, while Moreno had some good striking, showed that a little bit in the show. Still very raw in his overall attack. However, his grappling background was really the difference in this fight, as he was able to attempt 13 takedowns, landed 5 of them, 3 of them coming inside the first round, and I think that really helped tip the scales to him in that round, in which Benoit was able to land a couple of big shots. Round 2, Moreno continued with his takedown assault, landing 2 of 3 there on Benoit, 32-8 in terms of strikes landed. Then in round 3 was pretty close. You saw Moreno start to slow down a little bit. Benoit was still trying for those power shots. He 0 for 5 on takedowns. However, looking at how this fight probably played out, I probably would have scored round 1 for Moreno, round 2 for Benoit, and probably round 3 for Moreno. I think he had a little more gas in the tank, was landing a little more there towards the end. However, it did come down to a split decision, with 2 of the judges scoring at 29-28 for Moreno, and 1 29-28 for Benoit as well. However, you look at the stats, the stats really don't paint a picture of how competitive this fight was. Though Moreno did outstrike him 78-25 and take him down 5 times out of 13 attempts to just 0 for 1 in takedown attempts to Benoit. This was a very competitive fight, and of those 25 that Benoit landed, those were some hard shots, and he definitely had him rattled there in the second round, did Benoit. And really, that was probably his biggest opening in that fight, was that second round where he had him rocked. But I thought Moreno had won all along. It definitely was a close fight, an exciting fight. And this is a guy, Brandon Moreno, they said, who's only going to be 23 here in just a few days. So really young, a lot of potential. He already has a really solid grappling background, and if he can continue to improve on the feet, maybe work on conditioning and how to pace himself a little more, he definitely has a future here in this division. That's absolutely sure. And for Benoit, it's obviously going to work on being a little more active. I mean, 95 strikes in a 15-minute fight in the flyweight division is not going to cut it. Obviously, only landing 25. That's landing a little over 25% of your total strikes. That's not good either. But he's got to increase his output, increase what he lands if he wants to be successful in this division. Because this is a division of guys that can throw 10 strikes in 30 seconds. It's predicated on speed more so than big power. So if he wants to really compete with some of the top guys in the division, that's something that he's going to have to adjust. And it's something I think he's capable of, but something he obviously did not do in this fight. And not too surprising that he didn't get the victory. Next fight of the evening was in the women's bantamweight division, as Sara McMann took on Alexis Davis. Sara McMann came out actually throwing. showed a little bit of an improved stand-up game for about the first minute and a half. I think that maybe caught Alexis Davis by surprise. And then, despite having some good success with the stand-up, went to her bread-and-butter takedown there, took Alexis Davis down, who had a couple of submission attempts, who definitely was threatening from the bottom. Kind of a close round. If you actually look at landed strikes, Alexis Davis landed 51 strikes to just 21 to Sara McMann. You actually probably could have gave Alexis Davis that round. I think you can make a really strong case she won that round. However, in round 2, McMann went right back to the takedown and kind of right back into the dragon's nest, so to speak, that is the guard of Alexis Davis. However, this time, McMann was able to secure an arm triangle choke and get her body in correct position to get the tap there at 2:52 in the second round. And very dominant performance by Sara McMann. After losing to Ronda Rousey and then Amanda Nunes, she has come back. Obviously she did have the win earlier this year over Jessica Ai. While dominant, was not very exciting. She pretty much just took Jessica down and held her there. And beating somebody the caliber of Alexis Davis and doing so with a finish has been awfully impressive. And really after that, big skid she had in 2014 and 2015, where she had lost 3 of 4 fights, the lone victory coming over Lauren Murphy. The 2 victories here in 2016 definitely shoot her back up the rankings in the women's bantamweight division. I would say for me, I think a fight against Liz Carmouche would be a good fight. I think also potentially maybe a fight against Raquel Pennington would be good as well moving forward. She'll see what's next. Maybe a Valentina Shevchenko thrown in there, because it looks as though Juliana Pena, I think, will be taking on... actually, she might be taking on Shevchenko now that I think about it. But anyways, that would be a good fight. Even Holly Holm, I think, could be in the mix. So we'll see. Definitely, this was a nice win for Sara McMann. Obviously, it looks as though she had some damage on her face, so she may be out longer than expected. We'll have to see what all the post-fight doctors say and whatnot. But she definitely has a lot of momentum rolling into 2017 with this finished victory. Next fight of the evening on the Ultimate Fighter 24 finale. That was in the light heavyweight division as Jared Cannonier, against Ian Cutelaba. Boy, what a scrap this was between Cutelaba and Cannonier. Just non-stop action, both from a grappling standpoint and from a striking standpoint. Both these guys came out throwing very early and often in the first round. However, Cutelaba was able to secure 2 takedowns in that first round, probably the difference in that frame to secure it. Round 2 started off very strong for Cutelaba. He was able to land 3 takedowns in that round. However, he started to kind of slow down towards the middle of that frame, and Cannonier was able to really keep the fight standing a little longer, started to land a lot more shots as he outstruck Cutelaba 36-12 in that frame. That round really could have went either way. I probably would have scored it for Cutelaba with the 3 takedowns. Round 3, you could definitely tell Cutelaba was slowing down a little bit. He was only able to land 1 takedown in that round. And obviously there towards the end with Jared just kind of standing, just looking at him, taking punches, just staring him down like a video game or something. Did outstrike Cutelaba 31-13 in that final frame. Definitely landed some big shots. Looked like the fresher of the 2 fighters heading into that final 5 minutes. Probably would have gave Jared that round there. Overall, a very close fight. Strikes 83-50 in favor of Cannonier. 6 of 7 takedowns landed by Cutelaba. 0 for 2 by Jared. Ended up coming down, was a unanimous decision with all 3 judges scoring at 29-28 for Cannonier, the Killer Gorilla. A little surprising to me. I was kind of surprised it wasn't a split decision. It was a very close fight. It was a competitive fight. Definitely was a fun fight. This was the fight of the night, actually. What was a very excellent night of fights. Sara McMann also netted a performance of the night bonus as well, and Anthony Smith netted a performance of the night bonus for his knockout victory over Elvis the King Mutashish on the undercard portion as well. Excellent fight. They kind of mentioned what's next for Cannonier. He kind of mentioned that 205 is fine, but he said if his wife keeps on him and his nutritionist, he might even make 185. I don't know. He seemed like a pretty solid individual at 205. Obviously a former heavyweight. He is, however, only 5'11", so he would be giving up a little bit of height to a lot of these guys at 205. Most of them are over 6 foot. I don't know if he wants to jump right into that. Obviously, this was his first fight ever at 205. Maybe want to figure this weight cut out, 1 or 2 times before it, trying to attempt another 85. But definitely, I think this is a lot better fit for him than fighting real monsters there up at heavyweight. An awesome fight here against Cutelaba, who has had his ups and downs so far in the UFC. He did, however, defeat Jonathan Wilson in his last fight. But boy, this was a fun fight, and I definitely think either guy, whoever they go up against, it's gonna be a competitive bout. That's for sure. Next fight of the evening, welterweight division, Jorge Masvidal against Jake Ellenberger. Really weird fight, or weird ending to the fight, I should say. Masvidal, a guy that, very tough out, a guy that's kind of methodical, sometimes maybe gets too confident in his abilities, doesn't always maybe go for the gusto, not a guy really known for being a finisher, a tough guy, a guy that's in every fight, but not always a guy that you always see really going for the finish. And I think even though he had moved to 170 a while ago, we hadn't really seen him really up output or speed, or you thought with that less 15 pounds, he could maybe start to become more aggressive. He could throw maybe a little harder, he could throw a little faster because he didn't have to worry about pacing himself. And to me, this was the first fight since moving up to 170, which was, I want to say, over a year ago. I think his first fight at 170 was against Cesar Fujeda. Yeah, that was... So it's been about 18 months since he's moved up to 170 officially in the UFC. But this was the first fight to me where we really saw him really go after the finish, in my opinion. And he was really over Jake Ellenberger from start to the finish. Getting to that finish, very odd thing there is Ellenberger was trying to get away from the onslaught of Masvidal, kind of slips a little bit, then his looked like his right foot, the toes kind of slide into the part where the mat meets the cage. It was kind of caught in between there. You see him go down, try to take his foot out. Masvidal is all over him. Herb Dean appears to call time, saying that there's a malfunction. He couldn't get his foot off the cage. He goes to the commission saying, hey, can this fight continue? His foot was trapped up against the cage. He was defending himself. However, the commission rules that even though his foot was stuck, I guess that's just part of the hazard. And because time was called and he was getting hit, it ends up going down as a TKO victory for Jorge Masvidal, knocking out Jake Ellenberger at the 422 marker. Unfortunate for Jake. We'll definitely see him back because that definitely would be a raw deal for the UFC to cut him after something like that. While you can make a case that Masvidal put himself in an opportunistic position, you can also make the case that the cage shouldn't stop you from being able to defend yourself. And I think that fight should have continued after either restarting or something. Ellenberger seemed to be with it. His foot maybe seemed to... That's the thing. If they deemed his foot was broken, he couldn't continue, I'm all for that. That's fine. But it didn't look as though his foot was broken. It might have been hurt, absolutely. But it looked as though he could have continued. So, unfortunate for Ellenberger. Masvidal, after the fight, called out Don Cerrone. Don Cerrone does have a fight booked with Matt Brown at UFC 206. However, if I think he beats Matt Brown, it definitely moves him up the list of contenders. No offense to Masvidal, but I think he puts himself in a position for a title eliminator. I'm not sure if Masvidal's quite there yet. Yeah, he has 2 wins in a row, but look at it. He beat Ross Pearson, who was on short notice, and a lightweight. I mean, he's pretty much a lightweight fighter if we're really thinking about it. And then he kind of has this bizarre ending here with Jake Ellenberger. And sure, he does have a win over Cesar Fajeda as well. But the 2 times he's taken on elite-level competition, Lorenz Larkin and Ben Henderson, he lost both times. Yeah, those were split decision fights. They were close fights, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, they're still losses. So, Masvidal, I don't know. He probably cracks the top 15. I think that's safe to say. But I'm not sure. Now, if Cowboy loses to Matt Brown, yeah, I think you maybe can make that fight. But I think if Cowboy wins, I think he puts himself possibly one fight away from a welterweight title shot. Realistically, possibly a fight with Robbie Lawler or even Damian Maia would be not that far off of thinking. So we shall see what happens with Masvidal, but definitely he was winning that fight, that's for sure, and definitely looked like the best Jorge Masvidal I've ever seen so far in the UFC. And if that's the guy we're going to see moving forward, he will definitely be a force to be reckoned with in this welterweight division. Next up here for Tough 24 was the battle of the coaches in the flyweight division, as former title challengers Joseph Benavidez and Olympic gold medalist Henry Cejudo did battle. And just what an absolute war, an absolute close fight. Of course, there was that situation there in the first round where there were two low kicks by Cejudo that went below the belt. After the first one, referee Yves Levine gave a pretty stern warning to Henry Cejudo, saying he would take a point away if another kick happened. While I don't mind the warning, I was a little surprised that it came just after one. At that point, there had been no reason to really do that. However, he was a man of his word. It did happen again later in that first round, and Yves Levine did what he said he would do and took away a point. While, again, I don't think he should have taken a point away at that juncture in the fight. I think the first time, all right, it was a foul, not intentional. Second time, probably not intentional either, but I think at that second time, that's when you issue the warning. I don't think you issue the warning off the first one unless the first one looked absolutely blatant, which I don't think it was in this case. However, I will commend Yves Levine was a man of his word. He said, hey, if you hit him again, I'll take a point away. So from that aspect, he stuck to his guns, which you got to kind of respect him for. However, the point definitely kind of changed the course of this fight, and also the fact that because of the way this season was formatted and the fact that the coaches weren't the main event fight on the Ultimate Fighter finale, only made it a 3-round fight. This one I would have loved to seen be a 5-round fight, and I hope this one gets run back because it was absolutely close. I mean, looking at the stats, you have 70 to 69 terms of total landed strikes by one in favor of Cejudo. Benavidez, however, did throw more strikes at 232 to just 197 for Cejudo, and Cejudo was also 1 of 7 on his takedown attempts, landing one very briefly there in the first round, and each margin of landed strikes was just narrow. 22 to 21 for Benavidez in round 1, 22 to 21 in favor of Benavidez in round 2, and 28 to 25 in favor of Cejudo in round 3. Probably would have gave Benavidez round 1, would have gave that a 10-8. Actually, I probably would have gave that the 9-9. And then I probably would have had scored a draw. Now I think about it, I would have gave it a 9-9 round 1, probably Benavidez round 2, and Cejudo round 3. I think that's probably how I would have scored it. So I would have had it scored at a draw. However, none of the judges did have it scored a draw, which is a little interesting. Had two 29-27s, one in favor of Cejudo, one in favor of Benavidez, and Glenn Trowbridge scored it 30-26, scoring every round for Joseph Benavidez, obviously with the point taken away there from Cejudo, which I think is probably the most interesting scorecard of the three. Benavidez wins by split decision. I'm not sure if Benavidez is next for Mighty Mouse. Obviously, Wilson Hayes was supposed to have a title shot back in July. That kind of got slipped by the wayside a little bit with this Ultimate Fighter season being announced. So I don't know if Wilson Hayes will be next for Mighty Mouse. Benavidez will be. However, I would love to see Cejudo and Benavidez be a 5-round fight. I would love to see him fight again because I thought Henry Cejudo, that was probably the best Henry Cejudo I've ever seen. Obviously, that's saying something considering he only landed one takedown briefly. You would have think the best Henry Cejudo is a guy that had 5 or 6 takedowns or something like that. But the fact he was able to go in there, stand up for the majority of the 15 minutes with a guy like Joseph Benavidez and go toe-to-toe and nearly win, and at the same added time, get a point taken away, I think says leaps and bounds to what they mentioned, going with the new striking coach into this camp, and it definitely paid dividends. It definitely did, and I think Henry Cejudo, if that's Henry Cejudo fought Mighty Mouse Johnson, maybe he still would have lost, but I don't think it would have ended the way it did. So I think we have a completely different fighter moving forward. I would love to see a Cejudo Benavidez too. As far as what's next for Benavidez, I mean, after beating the number 2 guy and being the number 1 guy, for years in this division, not having the championship, really, his only fight realistically left is Mighty Mouse for a 3rd time or a rematch with Cejudo. To me, those are really only his 2 options. If he loses either one, I mean, I think he's pretty much done in the flyweight division. I mean, if he lost to Cejudo again, yeah, I know it makes him 1-1, but I don't. I mean, he may have to move back up the bantamweight. I'm not sure. So we'll see how that goes. But definitely, obviously, if he loses to Mighty Mouse a 3rd time, they're not going to give him a 4th. It's even hard to give him a 3rd, but they're definitely not giving him a 4th. I can tell you that for sure. Speaking of the aforementioned champion Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, he was putting his title on the line there for a 9th time against Tim Elliott, who won the Ultimate Fighter Season 24. And if you didn't catch it on our Facebook page and my official SoundCloud for Beyond the Cage, he was a co-host for a while, had to dip away. He, obviously, like Tim Elliott, he does have a young child, taking care of her inside the house as well. So he's kind of stepped away, but has recently found some more time to schedule, so he's going to help me out doing some interviews when I won't have time to. That's being Colin Camper. He was able to actually have a quick chat with Tim Elliott before the fight, so if you haven't heard that, want to check out that, head over to soundcloud.com/Jim Graham, and you can check out that interview Colin did with Tim Elliott. Once again, thanks for Colin for helping out the show and talking to Mr. Elliott, who gave Mighty Mouse all he could handle for 25 minutes, including a absolutely awesome first round, which definitely saw the major underdog getting the first round. Probably the first round Mighty Mouse has lost, not ever, but maybe since he got knocked down by John Dodson in their first matchup. Probably the last time Mighty Mouse has lost a round, and Tim Elliott gave him all he could handle. I mean, Tim Elliott actually did outstrike Mighty Mouse 110-86. He actually was 4 for 4 on his takedowns. Champion was just 5 to 7. However, in the final 4 rounds, the constant top pressure control and overall submission attempts, they only credit him with 3 submission attempts, Johnson, but it seemed like he attempted a lot more than that. They also credit him with having 11 pass attempts. That just dominant top game. While Elliott did not take a lot of damage, never was really close to getting submitted. Just the constant threat and obviously being in control of the top game is what made the difference in this fight. And Tim Elliott, for a guy that nobody expected to maybe even last 2 rounds with Demetrius Johnson, lasted 25 minutes. He made it fun. He made it competitive, and definitely challenged the champion like a true warrior that he is. And for Tim Elliott, definitely, he can scrape a couple more wins together. He can absolutely be back in the same position, possibly a year to 18 months from now. So for Tim Elliott, he was really in a no-lose situation. Really, who cares if he lost to Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson? Nobody expected him to win. So him coming out there and doing that type of performance didn't really surprise me too much, because at the end of the day, like they said, Tim Elliott's an awkward guy. He's hard to game plan for. He really doesn't do anything correctly, if you really think about it. He's not a guy that's a prototypical fighter. He's definitely an outside-the-box guy, and he does a lot of crazy things and things you wouldn't expect. And because of that, he's in almost every fight, and definitely gave Demetrius Johnson a very tough test. And Johnson was able to overcome those early chances and do what he does best, and that's smother people with his incredible skills. And for Johnson, maybe it's a Benavidez 3rd matchup. Maybe Wilson Hayes somehow slips in there. I'm not sure, but he's only 2 fights away from breaking Anderson Silva's consecutive title defense record. Currently, he's tied with George St. Pierre at 9. Silva, of course, had 10 before losing to Chris Weidman. And obviously, in Silva's defense, you can kind of make an asterisk. He really should have 11. Of course, we all know his one fight there against Travis Lutter did not count as a title defense because Lutter missed weight. So if Johnson really wants it, he should get 12. But as it stands, it is officially in the books 10. and Johnson can come one step closer with his next fight, whether that's Benavidez, Hayes, or somebody else new to the picture as well. Before I get to UFC Albany, real quick, Bellator lost a big main event and a big fight there at Bellator 168, which will be this weekend in Italy. It was supposed to be Rafael Calvario against Melvin Manhoef, the rematch of the two that they had earlier this year for the middleweight championship. Calvario had to pull out of the fight due to injury, so now Joey Beltran will take on Alessio Sakara as the main event. Also added Felipe Lins against Kleber Silva. Claudio Anunsario will take on John Salter. And Valerio Marcia will take on Goti Yamauchi, who is now going to be fighting at 155. Of course, he had that very quick victory over Ryan Couture not too long ago. So, obviously, losing that fight there with Manhoef and Calvario kind of takes the steam out of this one a little bit. However, this will be in conjunction with their first fight in Italy, which they had in April of this year. Will also feature some kickboxing, I believe on the same night or same day. However, like they have been doing with kickboxing, unfortunately, much to my chagrin, it looks like the kickboxing will be tape delayed for next week, I'm assuming. So that will be Bellator Kickboxing 4. That should feature some fun fights as well. Looking forward to those. I'll talk more about those next week since they are tape delaying it. But I'm not going to go too in-depth about Bellator 168 because none of these fights... I mean, the Yamauchi fight's big because obviously him being Ryan Couture and getting another victory definitely shoots him up the lightweight rankings, which obviously right now are very competitive with Michael Chandler having that victory over Ben Henderson. So Yamauchi is definitely a guy that can start to factor in and make a push for the title if he can get another victory at the weight class here at 168. All right, let's get to UFC Albany. That will be coming up here this Friday on the UFC Fight Pass. Some pretty solid fights, though, on the undercard. J.J. Aldrich, who we've had on the show and was also featured on the Ultimate Fighter Season 23, she'll be making her UFC debut against currently number 15th ranked Juliana Lima. Also, a former Ultimate Fighter winner, the male winner there of that season of the Ultimate Fighter Season 23, Andrew Sanchez. He's going to be taking on Trevor Smith. Also, he was on the looking for a fight there with Dana White. Randy Brown, he will take on the brother of Chris Camuzzi in Brian Camuzzi. And also some more Ultimate Fighter contestant. Justine Kish, formerly of Ultimate Fighter Season 20, will take on Ashley Yoder of the Ultimate Fighter Season 23. Altogether, 8 fights will be featured on the preliminary portion of the Albany card, starting at 5:45 Eastern Time on Fight Pass with the main card. Let's see here. If I got that right. No, yeah, 5:45 Eastern. And then the main card will start at 9 p.m. Eastern, kicking off with the guy I interviewed earlier in the show, Gian Villante, as he will take on Safarov, if I said that name correctly, who, when I was talking with Gian, he is 8-0. He has finished all 8 of his professional bouts with 6 knockouts and 2 submissions. Villante is coming off a loss to Ira Latifi, was supposed to be taking on Patrick Cummins. Safarov taking this fight, big ups to him, but taking on Gian in his home state, he's definitely got to be motivated to be fighting here, wants to get off that losing streak, and obviously Safarov is a guy he can kind of help build his name back up in doing so. And I think Patrick Cummins, not to say Villante couldn't have beat Patrick Cummins, but I do think this is a little bit of an easier fight now because Cummins is a really good wrestler, a guy who can definitely take a punch, and is definitely a very competitive guy in this light heavyweight division. Getting a guy like Safarov is a way he can kind of get a win under his belt, get some confidence, and then maybe retake a guy on like a Patrick Cummins to kind of build his way back up the ladder there in the light heavyweight division. But because I don't really know a lot about Safarov, it's really hard to know what he's going to bring to the table. Villante even himself admitted that he really hasn't seen much footage of this guy, so we'll kind of see when it comes to Friday night what the Russian from Sochi will have for the guy from Long Island in Villante. But Villante's usually not in boring fights, so I'm looking forward to a good fight to kick off the card here. Speaking of guy who's not in boring fights, if you remember the Sean O'Connell Steve Bossy fight, he'll be taking on Corey Anderson, currently ranked 9 in the light heavyweight division. Anderson, love the nickname. He's Beastin' 25-8, very strong wrestler. I think if you go back to his fight against Gian Villante, has slowly developed a pretty nice stand-up game, but standing up against Sean O'Connell, you definitely are giving O'Connell his best chance at winning, a guy that definitely is a barroom brawl type, and definitely a guy will take a punch to get one. And for Anderson, to me, he's got to go to his roots. He's got to get in close, tie up O'Connell, and take him to the ground. However, he's got to watch out for big, strong uppercuts from O'Connell. He has a little bit of a shorter reach, just 74 inches to 79 inches for Corey Anderson. So coming inside, you are coming into the power and the danger of O'Connell. So that's one thing Anderson will have to watch out when he goes for those takedown attempts from the double leg and from the clinch as well. So O'Connell's a guy that's not going to make it easy, but I think if Corey Anderson can probably get past that initial first round, I think he definitely is the stronger of the two fighters and the better condition of the two fighters. And if he can get this thing into the second and into the third round, this definitely should be his fight to win. Co-main event of the evening. This one should be pretty excellent as Anthony Hamilton takes on Francis Ngannou. Both are very big and strong individuals. However, Anthony Hamilton gets the majority of his knockouts from getting in close, takedowns from the clinch, and then pounding out his opponents that way, whereas Ngannou is just an absolute monster with an 83-inch reach. I think he's 6'3" at 250 pounds. This guy is an absolute physical specimen. And for Hamilton, kind of reminds me very similar to O'Connell. The difference is that Ngannou is more of the stand-up fighter, being the taller. Technically, he's 1 inch shorter, but he has a much bigger reach, whereas Hamilton has the shorter reach. So him being more of the grappling-based fighter with the shorter reach, he's really going to have to go into the lion's den that is the predator, Francis Ngannou, to try to secure the clinch and secure takedowns. Now, Ngannou hasn't had too many fights where he's really had to deal with adversity off his back. I think that's a big question mark for the young gentleman out of the Cameroon. And if Hamilton can get this fight to the ground, be on top, he can absolutely win and knock out Ngannou. However, if he cannot get on the inside and gets beat up with those big power punches trying to come inside on what should be the much quicker and better striker of the two in Ngannou, Anthony Hamilton could get knocked out very quickly. So definitely a contrasting of styles. It should be fun. I'm definitely excited because I think this is probably the first real big test Ngannou will have so far in the UFC. Main event of the evening, the Black Beast, Derek Lewis, currently ranked 10th in the heavyweight division. He's going to take on Shamil Abdurakhmonov, if I said that correctly. Shamil comes into this fight with a record of 17-3. Like I said, currently ranked the 15th heavyweight in the world. Derek Lewis coming into this fight ranked number 10. Lewis is coming off a victory over Roy Nelson in a very bizarre and kind of controversial split decision victory. Since coming into the UFC in April of 2014, he has won 7 fights to just 2 losses, only losing to Matt Mitrione and Sean Jordan. It's kind of funny because both those guys are no longer in the UFC. All his wins so far in the UFC, other than the Nelson fight, have been by knockout, knocking out the likes of Damian Grabowski, Gabriel Gonzaga, Juan Potts, Guito Inochance, as well as Jack May. And I think that might be his only fight in his career that he won by decision, the one against Nelson, if I double-check that. Yeah, and he does have 1 submission victory, also to his credit. An 88% knockout rate does Lewis with the overall record of 16-4, does have a no contest. Looking at Shamil, definitely a guy who's flown under the radar, as he did lose his UFC debut to Timothy Johnson back in April of last year, getting knocked out by Johnson in the first round. Since then, he does hold victories over Walt Harris and the guy fighting in the co-main event in Anthony Hamilton. So he's really able to come back. A pretty good grappler, and I think really the key for Shamil is to try to draw this thing out. The longer this fight goes, the more it will favor the Russian. If he can overcome the early storm by Derek Lewis, I think he can win this fight. He's probably the more technically sound two of the fighters, but Derek Lewis just has raw, unbridled power, and if you can't stop that early flurry and you can't get out of the way of the Black Beast, you're going to find yourself unconscious on the canvas, and that's what Shamil is going to have to do if he wants to be successful in this bout. Real quickly, before I get to the picks, I do also want to mention that I will be doing separate videos talking about Glory 36 as well as Glory Collision, which will be happening this weekend. Also, I had an interview earlier where you heard me talk about Submission Underground 2, which will feature John Jones against Dan Henderson in a grappling match, as well as Misha Tate against Jessica Ai. You'll see the link pop up here as well. So I got a chance to talk to Jessica Ai about her grappling match here at Submission Underground 2. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Of course, UFC 206 as well in a separate video, as UFC 206 will be happening this weekend as well. But to my picks here for UFC Albany, starting first in the light heavyweight division, as Gian Villante will be taking on Safarov. Fortunately for Safarov, I don't know a lot about him. I think he'll make it interesting because obviously he definitely has some finishing skills, but I'm going to go with the guy I know and also the guy I interviewed here in Gian Villante. Corey Anderson against Sean O'Connell. O'Connell has a puncher's chance in every fight, but I just think the overall wrestling skills and conditioning of Corey Anderson will be enough for him, so I'm going to go with Beaston 25-8 in this matchup. Co-main event of the evening, Anthony Hamilton against Francis Ngannou. I think Hamilton's going to have trouble trying to get on the inside and take down the much, I think, stronger and athletic of the two fighters in Francis Ngannou, and I think trying to wade in on the guy with the bigger reach and better striking ability, I think will prove dangerous for Hamilton, and I'm going to go with the Predator Francis Ngannou to get the victory in this one. Main event of the evening, Shamil Abdurakhimov against Derek Lewis. I think Shamil definitely has a chance to win this fight. However, I think Derek Lewis is going to be able to land one of those big shots first before Shamil can get this fight into deep water, so I'm going to go with the Black Beast to win this one. Once again, I'd like to thank all the people that support the Beyond the Cage MMA Fight Club on Facebook. Like their page, MMA Fight Club, facebook.com/MMA Fight Club. Also, my friends at themmmacommunity.com, MMAsignatures.co, TopRatedMMA.com, Sports Talk, 313, Adam Nelson, Gorilla the Bear, Izzy Garcia the King, Flying Brian J, Legends of the Cage, of course, as well, all for their support of Beyond the Cage as well. And I appreciate their support each and every week here of the program. So, once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham and Instagram at TheJimGraham. And thank you, everybody, for once again listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.